Everybody, I'd like to call this special council meeting for Monday, December 9th to order. We do have Councillor McGuire Blaze and Councillor Mady not in attendance yet. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wendat peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Any declarations of conflicts of interest from members of council this evening? Seeing none, if you find yourself in conflict later, just let us know. Needing a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the published agenda for Monday, February 9th. Moved by Councillor Hammond, supported by Councillor Guerin. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll go to reports from administration. Development Services report. We'll go to Director Chadwick to talk about our rural transit feasibility study.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi, and good afternoon, Council. The purpose of tonight's special meeting is to present Council with the findings of a rural transit feasibility study. Exploring the feasibility, funding, and operational impact to securing rural transit was identified under the past Council strategic plan, as well as through a standalone resolution as put forward through our former mayor, Richard Meloche. Town administration therefore applied for and successfully received a federal grant from the Ministry of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Canada, which fully funded the study that allowed us to explore the feasibility of public transit in the town of Essex. Following an RFP process, the town retained Arcadis Professional Services Canada to assist in examining the unique travel needs of the diverse communities within Essex Centre, Harrow, McGregor, Colchester, and our rural areas. Here with us this evening is Nelson Silvera, our co-lead, my co-lead on the project. Nelson is our Manager of Economic Development and Strategic Initiatives. We are also joined by a couple of our colleagues from Arcadis, Mary Lou Johnston, which is our project manager, as well as Jeremy Cohen, our transit planner. So tonight we'll walk you through the results of the study and we'll present you with the recommended transit service for Council's future consideration. What you will learn tonight is that there is a need and an opportunity for rural transit in our community. However, there is of course a cost to such a service. So high-level potential capital and operating cost estimates for the recommended transit service will be presented, as well as potential funding sources, such as various provincial and federal funding streams and grants. Tonight, however, Council is simply asked to receive the report. Should a future Council wish to direct administration to further explore the recommended transit service, we advise that such direction be made through the future strategic plan. So thank you, Madam Mayor. If okay with you, we will pass the floor to Mary Lou, who will start things off for us.
Thank you, Lori. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. I'm Mary Lou Johnston. I am the project manager for this project. I'm also the Director of Mobility Advisory for Canada East with Arcadis. I have been with Arcadis for about a year, but prior to that, I was 30 years in government, mostly in public transit, both regional and municipal government. So I have been the client for many years on the other side, and now I've jumped into consulting. I have a long historical background in public transit, so I'm happy to be here tonight to really share the study that we've done and some of the experiences that we've worked on in the last year, Jeremy and I, some of the other rural areas as well that have done this type of study. So, you know, more than just Essex, we worked with Lanark County in Ontario as well. We've been working with Halton Hills. We're also working in Nova Scotia with Truro and Colchester, looking at all rural transit feasibility studies, so that we're seeing lots of communities out there really looking at ways that they can, you know, get their community more mobile, give people options for traveling around, and also meet their policy needs as they go forward. So without further ado, I'll jump right into the presentation. I don't know if you can see the presentation yet. Okay, next slide, please. So just to give you a quick study overview of what we went through in the study, I know Lori introduced it and how it came about. But going through the stages, we went through 4 different stages to really understand what would work. Every community is unique. So as I said, we've done this in other communities, but we had to look at the uniqueness of your community. So we did a needs and opportunity analysis. We came here and we did public and stakeholder engagement with the community and some of your stakeholders. We moved into service design and looked at potential options that could work here in the community, and then developed, as Lori said, a high-level financial and implementation plan, something that you can take away and build upon as part of your plan. So just quickly, I'll go through these. So the needs and opportunities part of it is really looking at a policy review. What policies did you have that council has approved, and how can we align with those policies that are already in place to provide affordability, accessibility, climate change, housing densification, active transportation? There's a lot of various policies that communities are looking at right now. And sometimes it requires collaboration between neighboring communities to deliver on something like a rural transit product as well. We also did a demographic analysis, looked at where there's your growth areas are concentrated, an equity analysis. So, understanding those groups that are most prevalent in some of your settlement areas. And then what is existing in your community for people to get around? So there is the Leamington to Windsor, which has been funded for several years, but as I understand, may no longer operate after April. And then the Community Support Center program, who provides that door-to-door specialized transit for people who are eligible for that service. So we did look at all of that. Next slide, please. And as part of it, we also looked at, what are the trip generators or travel patterns within the community? And from what we're seeing here and what we studied in the north end of Essex is where you see the biggest amount of people move between South Windsor and North Essex. There's a lot of movement within your community as well. We do see a pattern of travel there. When you get further south in Essex, you see the pattern go more east-west, towards Amesburg and Leamington. So in taking those patterns, that's important for us to understand where people are traveling and then what your needs would be from a public transit perspective. I'll pass it over to Jeremy just to introduce himself quickly and take over the public and stakeholder engagement. He and another colleague actually came here in person in the summer, so we had a great time engaging with your community.
My name is Jeremy Cohen, a transit planner on this study, and been at Arcadis for about 4 years, working in public transit and rural transit for about 8 years. I've worked with some other communities not too far away, Middlesex County around London, town of Tillsonburg, and a few other rural transit studies as well across Ontario. So covering the public and stakeholder engagement piece here specifically, we had a comprehensive program for public and stakeholder engagement, which ran this summer, past summer. We ran a public survey as part of that, which received about 560 responses from members of the public. And we did hear that there was support for transit as part of that survey. And it also provided us with information into where people live and where they want to go in the town and outside of the town as well. We also held a day of in-person pop-up style public engagement sessions across the town. So we met over 200 residents as part of that in Essex Centre, Harrow, and Colchester. And then lastly, we held targeted meetings with stakeholders, including community groups, peer municipalities within the county, and then the county itself. And we have some slides following this, just showing some of those in-person sessions that we had. So you can go next slide, please. So first we set up in Harrow in the morning at the tourist information booth, which is next to the Canada Post. We spoke with the residents passing by on the street. So, many people, not necessarily ones coming in with, wanting to engage specifically on transit, but more people who are capturing in their day-to-day, who might have, thoughts that are, I guess, unbiased. So we also got captured by the Google Street View car. You can see there that I'm now permanently a fixture of Harrow. And you can also see helping a gentleman fill out one of the online surveys on the top right there as well. So some good engagement in the community. Next, we went to Colchester Beach. So we actually had another Google Street View run-in as well, which was uh, unlikely, but it happened. And then we went to the actual beach and handed out study information cards, which had a link to the survey. We spoke to people who were, in a good mood, enjoying the sun, and got some good feedback on transit there. And then we capped it off at the Essex Fun Fest, which we timed our trip around to make sure we could talk to people at the Fun Fest. Our booth was located near the front entrance of the fair, so we got a lot of engagement. Talked to a lot of people that day who had a lot of very useful opinions on what transit could look like, and that was culminated in that interactive printout map where we got a great number of comments that helped us look at study options. So what did we hear? From the public, we heard about a need for transit to provide accessible travel for shopping, tourism, and recreation trips primarily, although also need for employment as well. And then from the community stakeholders, so next slide. Thanks. From the community stakeholders, we heard about a need for frequent and reliable transit to be most useful, and the importance of transit to access education, and also the need for strong coordination and governance to underpin the creation of that service. And from the peer municipalities, we heard about the need for local champions to build consensus to get that transit system up and running and continuing into the future. We heard about examples of successful transit elsewhere in the county, which leverages sustainable funding, and also recommendations to start with a pilot project and build incrementally over time. So when we looked at the actual service design phase of the project, we looked at a few different shortlisted options that came from a longer initial list. So the three here shown are fixed route transit, on-demand transit, and a rideshare taxi subsidy. So the first one, fixed route transit, that's your kind of conventional bus service operating like the LTW route or Transit Windsor might. It follows a predetermined schedule and a route. And typically these kind of services offer the highest capacity and efficiency, but you do limit yourself to coverage along that route only. So you really are looking at people who are living along that bus route, but you do try to tailor that bus route to cover as many people as you can. And then the operating cost for a fixed route is typically a fixed cost, which is based on the schedule that you're operating. The second service that we looked at is on-demand transit. So it's kind of a modern evolution of what used to be called dial-a-bus, where you'd call a bus using your cell phone or your home phone. But now we have smartphone apps, modern services that allow this to be a bit more efficient than it was in the past. So how it works is maybe similar to what you'd think of Uber is working. So you open up a dedicated on-demand transit app on your phone, or you call a call center and you put in your trip origin where you are and your destination you need to get to, and the system on the back end will look at all these trip requests and route the bus dynamically based on where those trips need to get to. So with a service like this, you can cover essentially the whole town. But one issue that has emerged with something we've seen with peers that have done similar systems is when you get to those peak periods, it can suffer a little bit with capacity. And so that's where the fixed route does have an advantage over the on-demand transit system. Costs for this type of system are also fixed based on how many vehicles you're operating. So yeah, you do have a fixed operating cost for that type of service. And then lastly, the ride sharing and taxi subsidy would work differently than those two services that I mentioned previously. Essentially you're leveraging existing services like Uber or like a taxi company to provide a discount on travel on those existing services under specific conditions. In areas where there might be a lower demand for transit, this can be a more cost-effective option. And as this is a direct subsidy, that cost would scale based on demand. So there are some measures that you might need to take to control the total cost of that subsidy. And there's a peer example in Innisfil, Ontario, that's been operating a service like this for a few years that we looked at as an example. Thanks. So we did look to evaluate those three types of services, and I'll try not to duplicate too much of what I already said, but looking at the fixed route option, it does offer for a basic level of service the lowest operating cost, and that might seem maybe counterintuitive, but that's because you are able to run one bus on a fixed schedule and provide that service that will have a higher capacity And when we get to the next evaluation, you'll see that it's maybe not the case all the time with other services. But again, as I said before, coverage on a fixed route is limited to where the route runs. So you're not going to be able to go everywhere with one bus route. So you try to tailor that to where the most people are. Fares for a fixed route are preset typically. And one thing we typically hear as well is when you have a scheduled service, it is a bit easier to understand versus something that might be changing day to day depending on where those trip requests come in for an on-demand type system. Next slide. So for on-demand, the main benefit that we see of on-demand transit is you really do get to cover the full town with one service. You can have either a door-to-door or a stop-to-stop type pickup, meaning you can pick people up where they live, or you can ask them to walk a small distance to either a physical stop or what's called a virtual stop. So that would just be a point in the app. It could be like a street corner type thing, and you just walk out, and that helps increase the efficiency of the on-demand system a little bit. Something that I'm just calling back to the fixed route, but in terms of the operating cost, it is a bit higher, and the reason for that is for a town the size of Essex, which has quite a large geographical area, having a single bus covering that whole area is going to be challenging, and so we'd see the need for 2 vehicles there, and there would be some additional operating costs to run 2 vehicles at once. But again, you are able to cover the full town, and I think I mentioned this as well previously, but when you look at some peer examples, rush hour, school bell times are times that have been cited as being a little bit more difficult for on-demand transit to offer the capacity that is needed. And sometimes what happens is trips get canceled or they get delayed to be able to provide as much service as possible. And that is just an impact to the service reliability. And the last option is the rideshare taxi subsidy option. So this would also provide a townwide coverage. And the difference mainly, as I said before, is that those costs are scaling with the amount of trips being taken, because you're just providing a subsidy for every single trip. Something that has definitely been experienced by the town of Innisfil is they've over the years had to kind of refine strategies to ensure that the subsidy they're offering in their annual budget is predictable, and so they're not either exceeding that subsidy or in the worst case hitting that early and then telling residents, oh, you actually can't travel anymore because we've hit our budget. So there are measures that need to be taken there. Something that they've done is add a monthly cap on trips, and we're recommending a similar measure here for that. So what you would do is ensure that riders have an equal access to that service. So text a little small here on the slide, but what we are recommending is a hybrid model. So we looked at the needs of the community and we developed a feasible transit service, which is combining aspects of the fixed route and the rideshare taxi subsidy systems. So for the fixed route service, you can see that there is a purple route shown there between Essex Center and Windsor. So what we're envisioning is that it would connect from Essex Center through to St. Clair College in Windsor, and you have that existing transfer point today with the LTW route, and that would allow you to connect to quite a few routes on the Transit Windsor system and get across Windsor to get where you need in the city. We envision that fixed route could include a partnership with neighboring municipalities to serve Essex, Tecumseh, and LaSalle, and there would be cost sharing between those municipalities to enable that intermunicipal service. Service would be provided to Essex Center every 90 minutes as part of that route. In the event that intermunicipal partnership can't be achieved, there is an alternative route shown on the map in a dashed red line, which would run directly from Essex Center to St. Clair College, and that would run 4 times a day at a similar level of investment. So we took our service design and we analyzed the benefits of the fixed route using a transit planning software called Remix. So you can see the map on the right side there is an analysis of how far you can get from Essex Center, I believe specifically from the sports complex on that proposed service. So the darkest blue being, I believe, 30 minutes, and then the red being 90 minutes. So essentially you're able to cover the majority of Windsor, more so on the central and west side. And much faster access to the south end of Windsor, which in our public consultation we heard a lot about the necessity of that for, day-to-day errands, shopping, and as the college as well. Okay, so for the rideshare and taxi subsidy component of the recommended model, we would be looking at a system that would have different fare types depending on the type of trip you make. So you can see on the map on the slide above that there are some points in blue that are both in the town and outside of the town. So the points within the town correspond to community centers and libraries that are within the town of Essex. Most of them are within walking distance of the main streets and main, commercial areas of each settlement area. And what we would propose is that there be a flat fare to take a trip on a rideshare or taxi service to those locations. So like a traditional transit, fixed route transit service, for example, you pay a flat amount, and we'll get into the details on a later slide of that. For travel within the town, not to one of those key stops, there would be a discount. And this is the same model that is used in Innisfil. They're prioritizing access to those key nodes, and then to get around elsewhere, there's a discount that provides additional affordability, but not a flat fare. And then there's also some stops that are located outside of the town. And we, looked at our public consultation feedback. We heard about where people need to get to that, might not be within the town boundaries. And we felt that those 3 locations were of high importance to provide a discount. So not a flat fare to those stops, but a discounted rate. And that is in Amherstburg, the connection to Route 605, which is a Transit Windsor route that connects to Northwest Windsor. And it's also co-located with the Amherstburg Walmart. In Leamington, there's Erie Shores Healthcare, which we heard that that's a commonly accessed destination for people living in the south of the town that need healthcare. As well at LaSalle, there's the St. Thomas of Villanova Catholic Secondary School, which is zoned for some students in the town of Essex, but is located in LaSalle. So there would be a discount to those stops. And then this is just breaking down some of the details in terms of the operating hours, number of trips, number of stops, fare structure, and operator for a recommended operator for those 2 services. I'll just zero in here on the fare structure. So we're proposing that the fixed route would be $5 one-way trip. And you would also have discounted pass options like a monthly pass to allow people who travel more often to get a discount on that service. For the rideshare and taxi subsidy, there would be that flat fare. So we're proposing that would be $8 to those key stops that are within the town. And then for travel to any other location in the town or those 3 intermunicipal stops, there would be a discount of $8. So you'd be paying a fare that would vary, but you'd get a subsidy from the town to make that travel more affordable for you. And for the recommended operator for the fixed route, there's a few options. One that we heard positive feedback on is, of course, Transit Windsor, which is operating the current LTW route. But there are also private sector operators that could provide that service. And for the rideshare taxi subsidy, that would likely be what's called a transportation network company, or TNC. So that something like Uber, which is operating in the town today, or a taxi service, which from our understanding would need to be start up or enticed to operate in the town in the future. I'll turn it back to Mary Lou. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. I don't know if anyone's confused about the rideshare. I know I've given an example before. So on the rideshare, if someone were to take a taxi or an Uber or service, and say you were traveling from point A to point B, and that Uber would be $20 to the customer, the discount would be $8. So the customer would then pay $12 instead of the full $20. So that's sort of the town providing a subsidy to take, travel amongst the community to the community members. But we've, as Jeremy said, we've identified key locations where they get that discount in order to travel. And again, this is just a model that we think would work for you, that you can take into your strategic plan further to see how you narrow that down and deliver on it. But, some of the benefits of having transit in general, but looking at what we've developed is affordability. So we've tried to set it up so it is affordable. It's a lot cheaper than owning and operating a car. you'll have to push, yeah, the buttons to keep bringing them up. Thank you. Supportive housing options. It supports the town of Essex, your official plan, and develops transit supportive mixed density housing. Having more mobility options for people helps support that type of community. Next one. Accessibility. So it provides accessible transit for people, beyond just a smaller service where people are eligible. It allows people to get around to different destinations, an important part of your community. Next one. Climate change. So I know all communities are challenged with climate change mitigation and what actions. It is aligned with that, moving people away from cars, reducing single occupancy vehicles, trying to get people to do more ride share is a way to move towards climate change. Economic development, supporting access to employment. People do work, I'm sure, within Essex and live within Essex, but often people have to travel outside of the boundaries to access employment. So this is a way to not only bring people into your community, but make it attractive to live in, because there are options for people to get to jobs. Aging in place. We've heard this in several of our studies about, an aging community and people who can no longer drive or no longer have access to a car, who want to continue to live in the community and age in place, but don't have a way of getting around. And this supports aging in place. And then lastly, healthy communities, encouraging people to move and walk. As Jeremy showed in the picture, there was a gentleman on his bike that joined us and, very interested in getting around in other ways besides taking his car. So moving right into the financial numbers, we looked at it over 5 years. So what I wanted to show versus sort of year 1 to year 5. And in my experience, anytime you introduce a transit service, or even, I worked for Mississauga Transit, and even if we'd introduce a new route, there was always ramp up time, which is 1 to 3 years to get people to know that the route's there, build up your ridership. So we've shown it, as you can see here, lower ridership, lower costs in the early years. By year 3 to 5, you're on more of a maintaining, where you have more of a plateaued ridership cost model. So the numbers I'm going to show you are in year 5, but I just wanted to show you first that there is that ramp up period that you'd have to make the investments early, and then watch as you continue to grow and market it, watch it grow. So on the next slide, it gets into option 1. And Jeremy talked about the 2 options. So one being where Essex, the town of Essex does it on their own, or option 2, I guess. Option 1 is where there could be municipal partnerships to support more of a municipal level of service. So in option 1, we're considering it as an intermunicipal partnership where the total annual ridership on the fixed route would be estimated in year 5 at about 33,000, for the ride share and the taxi subsidy program, 34,000. So the full system would carry about 68,000 trips annually. The number of daily round trips serving Essex, as we said, with this, there'd be about 7 trips that would go between Essex and Windsor area. Service frequency would be every 90 minutes. So it would be an opportunity to encourage people to go, because there is a 90-minute service. The estimated revenue based on the fare recommendation is 83,000. The direct operating costs, and that's based on, examples of Transit Windsor, for example. If you were to contract Transit Windsor to operate that many service hours, is, the 90-minute schedule, it would be close to 700,000. Some indirect costs we have allowed for, which is your administration, your marketing, the contract management. We've put in provincial gas tax funding, which is still available based on your population. And we have not put anything in about partnerships, because that's sort of down the road, strategic partnerships. But bottom line, when we look at it, it's about 812,000 is what we estimate. Again, at a high level, we're looking at this without any other municipal partnership contributions. That's what we're looking at for that model, for that option. So option 2 is the next one, where it's the town only service. The reason you see a lower ridership is because it's just the town. It's not gathering from other communities where it increases your ridership. The number of daily trips, we put 4, so that would be every 240 minutes, so every 4 hours. That's a little bit more frequent than what people have today. The revenue is less as a result of the lower ridership, and the direct costs are less because of the lower frequency of service. The rest remains the same. So the bottom line here we're looking at is 368,000 to have 4 trips a day, getting people between Essex and Windsor on the fixed route, and also operating the rideshare taxi subsidy program. And then lastly, the estimated capital cost. So for a fixed route, if you were to have bus stops, we're estimating there'd be about 16 bus stops in the community. And that would include, pouring concrete pads. Maybe you can do that as part of your roadway program. And obviously a signpost. If there was an additional need to put shelters in, a shelter costs about $20,000 approximately to put a basic shelter in. And there are warrants and ways to determine shelter locations, but just to give you a ballpark number to think that out as you develop in the future. And then lastly, there are potential funding sources and applications that you can move towards for both capital and operating costs. We've just put those down there. They're ones to consider as part of your strategy as you go forward as well. And that's the end of our presentation. I'd like to pass it back to Lori just to wrap it up, and then we welcome any questions you have.
Thank you, Mary Lou and Jeremy. So Mayor Bonnie and Council, just as a wrap up, so today we're asking you to receive the Rural Transit Feasibility Study. If you've taken note of any questions, we're here and hopefully able to answer questions on the spot. If we need to take away, we can certainly take away and provide you with responses if digging deeper is required. In the future, I think where we're headed is that should council wish to further explore the recommended hybrid transit service model, we advise you that that direction be made through the future strategic action plan. Thank you.
Director Chadwick, before I go to council, I just have a question. Can we post this somewhere on our website for quick access so that we don't have to, go through the agendas in minutes? Does anybody know?
Thank you, Mayor Rondi. We can certainly do that. We'll work with our manager of communications. We may actually even still active our project webpage, but I will work with Nelson and Mark to make sure that happens.
Mayor Shepley?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Just wondering, so the rideshare option that you were discussing that Innisfil uses, they're double us and growing. I'm just wondering, do you know roughly what they put into that each year in order for them to operate that?
I would have to look at the specific numbers. I know it's north of $1 million a year. I will say, though, that they are a GTA commuter suburb, so we see that the travel patterns there might be a little more conducive to that kind of use of the Uber service. Particularly, they have a fixed rate trip to their GO station, to the commuter rail, and I think a lot of their travel is to that station. So we're not predicting that you have the same level of demand or the same requirement to have that much subsidy here, but definitely controlling the cost of that. The per trip subsidy, making sure that you're not exceeding that budgeted amount will be very important regardless of how much demand there is.
Thank you for the report. It's informative for sure.
In the cost analysis part, you made mention of provincial gas tax funding of $225,000. Maybe this is to our own administration, I'm not sure, but would this provincial gas tax funding of $225K be in addition to what we already received, or is this extra for adding a transit route? Or would we be, yeah.
I'm not sure, Director Rowe or CEO Drusevich, CEO?
There, it would have to be an addition, so we would have to apply for and receive that. They do have a separate transit funding stream through gas tax. Currently, all of our gas tax money are dedicated to our asset management program.
Any other questions, comments from members of council? Anybody else? Okay, so we know our next steps. Tonight, we're just receiving this and then we will take it forward. We do have a couple council members missing, so we'll make sure that they review the document as well and maybe your presentation. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
You did a lot of work on this. How long is this report before we need to refresh it? Like how long, if we put it on a shelf, what's it good for? Is it good for 5 years, 6 years? What's your opinion on that?
I would say a couple of years. I mean, you've got inflation every year, so numbers will change. When you're contracting out, you see collective agreements change, so prices go up. So you will see some change there. So I think you'd have to do a little bit of work on an annual basis just to realign your numbers against inflation and that sort of thing. The other thing that may change is potential funding sources. They're always evolving as well. You never know when they're going to come and go. So that's also something to consider along the way, unless there's anything else you can think of. Okay.
For the Leamington to Windsor bus that recently we're losing, this council, I believe, sent a letter to the province asking for help with that. So I'm kind of disappointed in losing that because I felt like, if anything, that would be something that we could build off of. So that was kind of, a big punch in the gut. But I'm not sure. I know maybe we could find out going forward, but I'm not sure the province has really put a lot of funding into active transportation like this, but it's certainly something we can keep our eyes open for. Okay, with no other comments from council at this point, I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder that the development services report be received. For information, Councillor Hammond, Deputy Mayor Shepley. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And at this time, I'll seek a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Allard, any questions? All in favor? Thank you for joining us tonight and thank you for bringing the presentation.